Thank you for tuning into the back page. It is October 18th, and this is episode 6. I'm your host, Collin Crisp.
And I'm Carter Sims, and today we're going to talk some hate sports off the top. So most recently in football, unfortunately the Pacers lost to Canal Winchester, but they'll have a game on the road against Franklin Heights, and then next weekend, not quite sure about the location or opponent yet, but they'll have a playoff game of some type to play in. Boys soccer beat Franklin Heights 9-1 to close out the season, and girls soccer beat Franklin Heights 16-0 to close out the regular season and claim OCC champs. Both teams will have playoff games going in the future. And last night, Lady Pacer Volleyball won in 3 sets against Hilliard Bradley in the first round of their playoffs.
In the college world, our Ohio State Buckeyes we watch every week. They had their most complete game of the year so far, and despite the offensive injuries, to blow out Purdue 41-7. The game wasn't supposed to be close, and it never was, but it ended up being our first game that was from start to finish. I feel like we dominated every facet of the ball, and I was saying last week I wanted to see a game like that before we played at Penn State, and we ended up getting it here.
Yeah, it was funny watching this Purdue game, and you think about the upset at Purdue a few years ago and just how shocking that was. I feel like a lot of times Ohio State athletes will have similar performances to what we saw from Purdue in that game, and they'll kind of get swept underneath the rug, just because it's kind of what you expect from an Ohio State football team at this point. But I probably say this every week, but I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr.'s performance should be swept under the rug.
I agree. With 6 catches, 105 yards, and a TD, I feel like every week we just come in here and we're like, what was the player of the game, the Buckeye game? Well, Marvin Harrison.
Yeah.
And he's just one of the best players in the country. Every game he's in, he makes a massive impact.
I mean, this weekend, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but do you think, how things have been going lately could lead to him, receiving a trophy for being the best player in the country?
I sure would hope. I mean, we saw last year's winner of the Heisman kind of get rocked, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But, with him going down, I think it leaves the door wide open. Rather it be a quarterback we're about to talk about in a minute or two, or a Marvin Harrison. I think that it's really up in the air. As you probably know, if you're watching this, we play Penn State next week, and it's a battle in the second half of the season. We're both going to be undefeated, and games like that are always huge. And I was sitting back, and last year we had a really late one between Georgia and Tennessee, and then we had Ohio State, Michigan. I was curious what we could see like that this year. So I went through the 8 undefeated teams left, and it's essentially the top 7 plus North Carolina. And I was curious what could happen with this. And the winner of Ohio State, Penn State, they will play Michigan at some point. And if they don't lose a game they shouldn't, that'll be an undefeated game. So 2 of them are in the Big Ten, and if Ohio State wins, it could both be them. And then the only other one left, Florida State, North Carolina. That's the only other game that could be undefeated when it happens, and that would be the ACC championship game. So this game right here that we have coming up next week, it's one of the only 3 games that will be on the back half of the schedule that has 2 undefeated teams facing each other. This is a huge game. It's going to be one of the best of the year.
Yeah. I think it's crazy to feel this way, but there's only a handful of games left. The college football season goes by quickly. Mm-hmm. And whenever you have a big game against a conference opponent like a Michigan, like a Penn State, in past years it was maybe Michigan State,
Wisconsin.
There's always that okay, but what's next factor after? Because an Ohio State team, you're always looking forward, not the team, but fan base, you're always looking forward to the Michigan game. And I think that what Buckeye fans really need to understand is this Penn State game might be a playoff game.
Oh yeah.
This could be, the difference between a Big Ten championship and national championship appearance, everything, the whole aspect of control your own destiny is completely on the line for both teams this weekend.
It was in years past we've seen A plus Ohio State, A plus Michigan, and then we've put Penn State B plus A minus. I don't think it's that way this year. Penn State is the kind of team, even with a freshman at quarterback, that they could win the whole thing if they had a good run. And this is their first step to that. They're in a similar boat as us, to where besides a non-conference game, they haven't really played very much on their schedule. So this is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I was kind of talking about with my family this weekend. How are we in essentially mid-October now, and Penn State gets to play UMass. Part of that for me, it's like not that who you play is the ultimate test of like what you're going to be as a team, but it's just interesting to me like going into this game. I feel like one undefeated is a little more stronger like resume than the other.
I think that we have, out of the 3 undefeated teams left in the Big Ten, I think we have the strongest resume. Because, I mean, who's Michigan played? They ain't played nobody. And then Penn State, they've had more games than Michigan has, but they're still not like a staple win on their schedule. Like, that was impressive. Like, Ohio State's got the Notre Dame win, and now we have that blowout Purdue win, and we beat what was an undefeated Maryland team. And, out of all the Big Ten undefeated right now, we have the best resume going into this game. It's just a matter of showing it. Did you see that article of, like, anonymous coaches talking about the Ohio State defense?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I think it was an ESPN published article, but they're talking. I couldn't believe it I was reading. It was a terrible article. If you know what I'm talking about, you know how bad it is. Because it's just a bunch of anonymous coaches going through and just picking apart the Ohio State secondary. And I'm like, this is such billboard material right here, bro. We do not have a bad secondary. In fact, I think our secondary for the defense has worked this year. It's been the most involved in the run game the defense has ever been. And they don't get spread out to where we can just get wrecked like we did against Georgia last year. Like, I think that this is the best secondary, and the one that we're used to seeing. It's been weird that we haven't had the last 2 years that we've had this year. I think it'll be huge against a Penn State team that really leans on a young quarterback. And, I think that this should be – if it's not a close game, we're going to win it.
Yeah.
We were talking about battles of undefeated teams, and the one we had last week was probably our best game of the week. It was a 36-33 thriller where number 7 Washington topped number 8 Oregon. What was your thoughts watching this game?
I really expected Oregon to win this game, and I didn't think it was going to be that close, to be honest. Like,
Me too.
In, I could have seen Oregon winning by 14, 15 points, and that would have made complete sense to me. I feel like Bo Nix has been in college since I was in 4th grade, and so just with that, and then kind of seeing Oregon develop throughout this year, I really thought that Oregon, even though they were, really closely ranked, but not like the favorite, I really thought they were going to be, the best team coming out of this, and then Michael Penix told me to shut up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching this game at Jets, right? And there was a point in the third quarter, late in it, where you're watching it and you're like, and Washington's up a good bit now. They're up 2 possessions, and you're going to the fourth quarter, and it looks all Washington out of the half for like 10 minutes. And, it's easy to just sit there and be like, Washington's going to win this game. But for me, for my shoes, I've been so high on Oregon. Like, I think even going into the season, my national championship prediction going into the season had Oregon in it. I think they're that good of a team.
Yeah.
And, I was like, I just don't see Oregon losing this game. And then there was that point around like the start of the fourth quarter where they went on that 14-point explosion in like 3 minutes and they stole the lead. And I thought, well, yeah, here it is. It's what I've been waiting for. Oregon's got it. I'm walking around Jets pieces like, told you so. They got it. And then they end up, it ends up going the Huskies' way. And I don't think this is because Oregon's a bad team.
No.
I did not watch this game and afterwards think, oh, well, I guess Oregon fell off. It's Washington's that good. Like, it's weird to say that about a team that went 0-12 in my lifetime, but that's a team that could win the whole thing in Washington.
And it's also it's weird to say that about a team that went 0-12, but this is already a team that's been in the college football playoffs at some point already.
Yeah, people forget.
Yeah, like obviously they got smacked by Alabama at the time, but it's just interesting to see like the varying levels of success that they've had in kind of a short period of time. But kind of going back to this game, I thought. For a long time, we were really talking about Colorado and how we think Colorado could be, a player in like the national picture. And in the last month or so, that's kind of fallen apart, right? Mm-hmm. And I think ever since Oregon played Colorado, they kind of stole the show, at least for the Pac-12, as far as like, expectations and playoff implications go. And you look at Colorado now, a lot of close wins. Kind of early in the season, you had Colorado State, you had Arizona State.
Arizona State. Yeah, let me not misspeak on the record. And then terrible loss against Oregon, and then this week going down to Stanford. That was brutal.
And you look at Oregon now, and it's like this Pac-12 is a lot better than we thought it was going into the season, but I don't know if it's as good as we thought it was about 3 weeks ago. And so part of me wonders, like, with the way that this league could work out, I'm not even sure that Washington's my pick to come out of the Pac-12 still.
Oh, I agree. I think it's their conference to lose, but I also think that there's a good chance they'd lose it, considering how many people are trying to take it from them. This is such a good conference. I think this is the best we've seen them inconveniently in the last
that's
year.
That's my point. Like, I definitely think like this is a lot stronger conference.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fitting that this is a year where a lot of teams are in the picture and kind of the final like year of the structure of the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure if any of them are like going to run the table. And so as much as it sounds dumb, because I thought Oregon was going to win the game going into it, and they obviously didn't. And now I'm kind of picking Oregon to finish out. Like, Oregon's still my team coming out of the West.
Oh, I agree. I think Oregon's that good of a team still, and by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon and Washington are still top 6 teams going into the final poll. You know, between Oregon State being around over there and UCLA showing that they're a real team, and USC, despite what we're about to go into, they're not bad. Like, there's a lot of really good out there, and we get to see a lot of that come to the Big Ten in the next coming years, and like that's going to be really interesting. Because I mean, the 4 teams that are going to the Big Ten now, they've all been ranked. 3 of them have been ranked in the top 10 for multiple weeks this year, and UCLA's been ranked throughout. So, we have 4 really good teams coming over the next couple of years, and we get to see them have one last big hurrah out west. Speaking of out west, we talk about USC, right? And this game, I hate to sit here and just be like I was right, but I've came in here a couple weeks in a row and said I don't think this USC team can win without Caleb Williams playing like God. Their defense is not that good, and their supporting cast is elevated by a quarterback that just has the ability to do so. I've also been saying that Notre Dame, despite the really weird loss to Louisville and us beating them, I think they're still a really good team. They just had one really bad week, and Ohio State's a really good team. I think their defense is one of the best in the country. I feel like everything that we've been preaching comes to fruition in one, like, just a defensive masterclass of a game out of the Irish.
And when you make the face of college football right now, and who I think is Caleb Williams, like defending Heisman candidate, I see him in all the commercials on Saturdays. I mean, he's almost given up throwing more yardage to the other team than his own.
Yeah.
And we talked about last week when Notre Dame lost to Louisville. Like, yeah, it was bad, but you're not always going to have that many turnovers and stuff. It was like they got the flip side of that type of performance for a win for Notre Dame this time, with obviously a lot of turnover from Caleb Williams. And I talked about I'm not really cool with Notre Dame making it like a cardiovascular health check every week, as kind of selfishly as a Buckeye fan. I want that to be a good signature win going forward. There was no accelerated heart rate by the end of this one.
No, I mean, at no point did it feel like USC's game. Like, from the start, the opening kickoff to the conclusion, at no point did they have no momentum, not once. Talking about undefeated teams that USC is no longer, we have 8 of them left, and 7 of them are in the top 7, and then we have 1 that is not quite up there with the rest of them, so we feel like they deserve a little shine. And this would be the North Carolina Tar Heels. They won a ranked matchup with number 25 Miami this week, and despite their, whatever you consider the opposite of late game heroics is what Miami's been this year. Winning 41-31 over any ranked team is always impressive, and Miami had a really good first half. It looked really good going into the first half, and then the second half was all Tar Heels. A really dominant run game, which was a little overshadowed by DeMontez Walker's epic performance of 6 catches, 130 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and like you talked about the dominant run game, let's not gloss over the fact that, how do you say it, Amarion Hampton?
Yeah, I think so.
Had 197 rushing yards. That's the type of numbers that I would put up on Madden 19 when I was in middle school.
Totally.
Playing after I got home off the bus. Like, that's video game numbers, and averaging over 8 yards a carry, you'll take that divided by 2 between 2 running backs for a college football team.
Totally.
So, like you said, I think UNC needs a little shine, and we've talked about kind of the ACC being the Wild West. And obviously, Florida State's kind of still top dog right now, just based off of ranking and current standing. But I don't want to say slept on, because I feel like there's a lot of good teams ahead of them. At the same time, I think UNC is a little bigger player in the national pictures than they're getting credit for right now.
I do think they're slept on. We talked about week 1 how they had the best defense we've seen them have in a long time. Mac Brown doesn't get the respect he deserves there at North Carolina. He's really made that really consistently offensive weapon, and then defensively, this is the best we've seen them. And they haven't had a cakewalk of a schedule. It hasn't been difficult. It's no SEC West schedule, but it hasn't been a cakewalk. And we're going to learn a lot more about them before the season's over, because they end the season with 16 Duke in a rivalry game at Clemson and at North Carolina State in their big rivalry. Like that, there's a lot of room to lose there. But if they can run that schedule, then we could see an undefeated North Carolina team in the ACC championship game. They're that good of a team, and I don't think that that's a crazy occurrence. Like they'll be favored in 2 of those 3 games at least.
It'll be interesting to see it play out. See, if what of these undefeated teams can kind of run the table and be basically not perfect, but have about as perfect a resume as you can going into the playoffs. I'll tell you where no undefeated teams are coming out of, and that's the entire NFL right now, because last 2 remaining undefeated teams went down this weekend. So we're going to just kind of talk about this, and I want to do it from kind of a question standpoint. Are you panicking on either one of the NFC contenders going down this weekend?
Not the Niners, for sure. I think that was just a game that, it was the perfect culmination of events for the Browns to have an impressive win. Like, from the weather in Cleveland, it being a road game for San Fran. The Browns' defense is undeniably great. It is a fantastic defense. And, if Brock Purdy has a bad offensive game and gives the Browns some defensive, essentially the defense was the offense for the Browns Sunday. That's going to happen. And heck, if the Niners make a field goal, they win that game anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a way that we should not just throw away the Niners. They still are probably the best team in the league right now, despite an ugly showing. They'll bounce back. Yeah. I'm pretty confident in that.
The Browns have a historically great defense right now this year, and it still came down to a field goal, and Brock Purdy playing his worst game in his entire NFL career.
Exactly.
The dude's never lost a regular season game until this weekend, and never been held to so few yards as he was this weekend. And so
his first regular season loss.
If arguably the worst part of your team is your quarterback, and your quarterback's still pretty good and plays his worst day possible, I still feel good going forward.
I agree.
Lose by a field goal. Kind of transitioning into something I want to talk about, I think this AFC North kind of has a pulse again. And in weeks past, I was kind of down with this whole division, even as a fan of one of the teams, because I didn't really feel like any of them were legit. And now all of a sudden, the Browns are defensively one of the best teams in the NFL right now. I feel like it's safe to say at this point. Ravens picked up a big win overseas in London this weekend. Bengals are back to 500. Again, I'm not super high on the Steelers like I've talked about all year, but all of a sudden I feel like this division is kind of back to being one of the most dangerous ones in the whole league.
I agree with you. I was looking at how it's turned out so far. When they play each other, you can see how much good defense there is there, because there's a lot of offensive firepower in that division, and then they end up stifling each other with their defense, and then they play teams outside of the league, and you can see all the components of that team, those teams, and it's a really, really good division. I did want to ask you, we've seen the AFC East pull off a big upset with the Jets this week, and they look the best they have in a hot minute. And what do you think from that? What do you look at the division and think the scope is?
There's a lot to take away from this weekend, because I think there's a few things. One, Zach Wilson is playing some of the best football he's played his entire career all of a sudden. And he's not a great quarterback. I wouldn't even put him in the top half of the league in terms of quarterbacks go, just even based off this past couple games. But he's no longer so detrimental to their team anymore. And it's more the absence of Aaron Rodgers, not just the impact of a negative impact of Zach Wilson at this point, which I think as a Jets fan you'll take. And we've seen them go toe to toe with the Chiefs and now beat the Eagles. So if you can stand up against both conference representatives in the Super Bowl from last year, that, there's no moral victories on the record, but I feel like you're starting to see the progression of the Jets team as the year goes on. And the other side of things, I still really like the Dolphins coming out of this division, But the Bills had a big win against the Giants this weekend, and we're not even going to talk about the horrible clock mismanagement that happened in that game. But I still see two teams in the Bills and Dolphins that either one or both of them could still be alive by divisional weekend.
Mm-hmm.
What's the embarrassing part about this division is the New England Patriots right now. So I really feel like all of a sudden, like as much as Zach Wilson gets criticism, he's not even the worst quarterback in this division. Like Mac Jones doesn't even look like an NFL quarterback right now. Mm-hmm. And it's been a hot minute since our boy Tom Brady was in New England, and it's starting to look like we kind of know which side between Belichick and Brady a lot of that success has been attributed to all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's for an AFC East fan, like a Patriots person who didn't run to Tampa with that with Tom. It's got to be tragic because like that defense is really good. Like that defense is legitimately a good defense in New England, and the offense is just so bad. I'm not sure Belichick's gotten an offensive draft pick right ever besides Brady, and that seemed like an accident. But like, yeah, it's not looking good. I'm not sure if we could have hot seat talks with someone who's won that many Super Bowls, but it's not pretty.
The only way I see Bill Belichick getting out of New England is like a little mutual parting of ways or a retirement or something. But I was seeing jokes this weekend. Yeah, if they take for Caleb Williams, even if they get a top pick, Bill Belichick will try to trade back and take like a long snapper from a Division III college. Like just like this franchise is not what it was at even 5 years ago at this point. And you start to wonder, like, when does the teardown happen? And I don't think Mac Jones is the guy that's going to transition you into anything new. I don't think Bill Belichick's going to change anything at this point. And I think one or both of them has to go by the end of this season.
So we talked about last time on pod about playoff baseball updates. And prediction-wise, I've done pretty good based off Carter putting me on the spot last week. But I did have one glaring thing. I may have let my bias get in the way, or the Phillies might just be that good. But the Braves ended up choking away this series in the NLDS, and it was not pretty. It wasn't even close. There wasn't a point where you're watching those games in Philadelphia, and you're like, hey, this is going to be fun. No, never. The first game was all Phillies. It was 10-2. Bryce Harper had doubled the Braves' RBIs of 2 homers that night, and that game was just never even competitive. And then Game 4 that finished off the series was a mostly unentertaining 3-1 win for the Phillies that contained 2 Nick Castellanos homers. On the other side of the NLDS, we last week saw that the Diamondbacks were up 2-0 on the Dodgers, and we talked about how they'd probably complete that at home in Arizona, and they ended up doing it that night with a 4-2 finish. I didn't put that in the dog, but I'm pretty confident it was a 4-2 final score in the Game 3 against the Dodgers. Unusually, all 4 of Arizona's run for my third inning solo homers. It was a pretty historic inning for their franchise. And now in the NLCS, it will be a game between the Diamondbacks and the Phillies, which for the 5-6 seeds going into the playoff. 4-6, but still. That's really wild to think about. And he had his prediction of the Diamondbacks going. I thought the Braves would, but they're out of it by now, so, it's whatever. But Bryce Harper went crazy on his birthday. It was really fantastic. He had a 420-foot homer, and on the first pitch he saw of the series, Philadelphia never slowed down. They gave him a happy birthday. Game 1 was 5-3 for the Phillies, and last night was the worst performance we've seen out of the playoffs.
What happened to my Diamondbacks, man?
They don't look good. I mean, it went 10-0 for the Phillies last night. I mean, Kyle Schwarber, Alec Bohm, and JT Realmuto combined for 7 RBIs in a game that was just an absolute rout. The only positive thing you could possibly say about this Arizona team is at least they get to play at home tomorrow for Game 3.
I mean, what's funny about this, kind of watching this as a neutralness, I know I picked the Diamondbacks. They're not really my team, like, that I would root for just out of all the teams. But, like, watching this Phillies team, it's like an all-star team of guys that I would have traded baseball cards for when I was playing Little League in, like, 2017. Mm-hmm. Like, we got Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, one of the best players in the league right now. Not a Bryce Harper fan, but he is that guy. And then one of my actual favorite players in the league, Nick Castellanos, who used to play for the Reds, which is my team. If anything, bad or sad happens, that dude is hitting a home run. So like Arizona better be on watch, because like if anyone passes away, or there's like a moment of silence, that dude's taking that ball 500 feet.
Yeah.
Like
Any more
always seems to happen. Like deep drive left by Castellanos. Like it just happens, right? Like, but my point in saying is that like that is the guy with like obvious pop on the ball off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And oh yeah, Bryce Harper's on his team, and then like just a 10-0 performance is obviously a lot of that is great pitching and great hitting from both sides, but I feel like this Phillies team, if you're a neutral, like this is a team that you really in your mind have number one in the like the remaining field right now.
Which is bizarre because they were never that in the regular season, but when you look at it, you see Arizona, which they have overachieved even to get here, and it's a really good year for them, but they're really young. This wasn't supposed to be their year. And then we have the Texas battle happening out in the ALCS, which we're getting into now. And both those teams look pretty evenly matched, but none of them have been as dominant as the Phillies. However, the Astros did clinch their ALDS since we last talked, as they have made their 7th straight ALCS performance after getting a 3-2 win endorsed by Jose Abreu's 2-run homer. And Game 1 of the All-Texas ALCS was a pitcher's duel between starters Justin Verlander of the Astros and Jordan Montgomery of the Rangers, and Montgomery won the war, allowing 0 runs in the 6 innings, while Verlander's 2 earned runs were the only ones allowed in the game, with a 2-0 shutout for the Rangers. In Game 2, which I may add was also in Houston, the Rangers came out roaring with 4 runs in the first inning. The Astros ended up making it close, climbing back into it, getting some runs off of Nathan Eovaldi, but a Jonah Heim 3rd inning solo homer ended up giving the Rangers a 5-4 win. So the Rangers will return back to home field, which is not much and when it's just right across the state, but nonetheless, they'll be at home for a 2-0 lead in the ALCS tonight.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot again, and I'm just going to do this for the rest of the baseball season, so just be prepared for it. Mm-hmm. We got 2 series that are 2-0 right now. Mm-hmm. How do they play out?
I think I called Texas to win the whole thing last time we talked. I'm sticking with it. I think Houston will make it close despite most of the games left in the series not being at their stadium. I think that it'll end up being if it went 6 or 7, I would not be surprised. Houston's just so consistently good. I do not think that Texas is just going to sweep them. I'd be stunned. But either way, I think that Texas is going to end up getting that one. And I don't know. I just watched this Phillies team, and I know how the Phillies are in the postseason because as a Braves fan, I've seen them destroy my Braves in the playoffs multiple years now, and they're just so hot. Like, they were really hot going into October and September, and they've been on a high streak for a while. And Arizona barely got in the playoffs, and it wasn't because they were on some big hot streak. The teams in front of them lost. So I just don't think that this really hot Phillies team is going to choke it away. I think that's going to be like an in-5 type situation, and it's going to be like a battle of the giants between a 4 and a 5 seed, strangely enough. But that's how baseball works sometimes.
Next week we'll be back to talk about some basketball for the first time on the podcast, which will be exciting. And we'll also touch on the Diamondbacks thrilling comeback that they're about to have in the next 7 days. I'm Carter Sims.
And I'm Collin Crisp.
And you can find our episodes on Spotify and YouTube.